A dangerous and prolonged severe weather pattern is locking in across a massive stretch of the United States, and this is not going to be a single day, move on and forget it kind of event. What is setting up right now is a multi-day marathon of severe weather that is going to affect tens of millions of people from the northern plains all the way to the Atlantic coastline, running from today through Tuesday and potentially into the days that follow. The threats on the table are real and serious: significant damaging winds, very large hail, and a tornado risk that meteorologists are watching very closely across multiple regions simultaneously. A powerful jet stream is the engine driving all of this, and it is pushing a deeply unstable and highly energized storm system on a track that will carry severe weather from the Midwest into the Great Lakes, then into the Ohio Valley, and finally into the East Coast before this pattern is finished. If you live anywhere in that corridor, this forecast is for you, and the time to prepare is right now, not when the sirens go off. Let us get into it, because there's a great deal to cover, and every single day of this pattern brings something different to the table. We begin with what is already in motion today, which is Saturday. The Storm Prediction Center currently has 2 separate slight risk areas of severe weather in place, along with a broader isolated risk zone covering a large section of the country. The first slight risk area sits across central Montana. The second is positioned over central South Dakota. Surrounding those 2 defined slight risk zones is a wider isolated risk, the dark green on the Outlook map, that covers most of Wisconsin, Minnesota, northern Iowa, and extends as far west as Nevada. For today, the dominant severe weather threat across the northern plains will be damaging wind gusts. Several clusters of thunderstorms, what meteorologists call mesoscale convective systems, are appearing likely this afternoon across Montana and South Dakota. These storm systems are going to be elevated, meaning they are developing higher up in the atmosphere rather than drawing energy directly off the surface. That structural characteristic is important because it means the tornado risk for today across those areas will be very low, approaching 0. Tornadoes are not the story today in the northern plains. Wind is the story, and damaging wind gusts as high as 85 miles per hour are the primary concern from these storm clusters. Gusts at that level can down large trees, damage roofs, and make travel extremely hazardous without any warning. Those storms across the Dakotas are expected to approach Sioux Falls and Watertown late tonight, before pushing into Iowa in the early morning hours of Sunday, at which point they are forecast to weaken and fizzle as the atmosphere becomes less favorable. If you live along that track in eastern South Dakota or into northwestern Iowa, expect the possibility of overnight storm activity, and make absolutely certain your weather alerts are enabled before you go to sleep tonight. A storm that arrives at 2 in the morning gives you no time to react if you are not already prepared. Now shift your attention to the Midwest, because that is where things get more complicated today. Across eastern Minnesota, central and western Wisconsin, and northeastern Iowa, a zone that includes cities like Minneapolis, Wausau, Eau Claire, and Rochester, there exists a conditional but genuine risk of a discrete supercell thunderstorm forming later this afternoon or into the evening hours. The word conditional here is doing a lot of work, and here is why. Today is going to be extremely hot across this region, and that intense surface heat makes it genuinely difficult for storms to break through the cap. The layer of warm, stable air sitting above the surface that essentially acts as a lid on the atmosphere, suppressing convective development even when the raw ingredients for severe weather are loaded and ready to go. Current high-resolution forecast models are not showing organized thunderstorm development across that tornado risk zone in the Midwest until around 3 in the morning, just south of Minneapolis. That tells you something important. The atmosphere is resistant to storm initiation today, but resistant does not mean impossible. And this is the part of the forecast that demands your respect. The atmospheric instability values loaded into this region today are extraordinary. We are talking about instability measurements well over 2,000 to 3,000 joules per kilogram across much of the Midwest, with some localized pockets potentially reaching close to 5,000 joules per kilogram. To put that in context, that is an enormous reservoir of storm fuel sitting in the atmosphere, primed and ready to be released if any storm can break through that cap. And when a storm breaks through in an environment like that, the development can be explosive and rapid. If a discrete supercell does manage to form today across that Midwest corridor, the potential threats would include baseball-sized hail and possibly an isolated tornado. The significant tornado parameter, a composite index that meteorologists use to gauge the potential for intense, long-track tornadoes, is technically elevated for portions of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa today. The odds of a tornado occurring today remain fairly low given the uncertainty around storm initiation. But if a storm breaks through, a strong tornado in that environment would not be out of the question. That is a statement that demands attention even on a low probability day. If you live near Minneapolis, Wausau, Eau Claire, or anywhere in western Wisconsin, southeastern Minnesota, or northeastern Iowa, keep away to receive weather warnings within arm's reach throughout this afternoon and evening. And even after sunset, elevated thunderstorm development remains possible, and some of those post-sunset storms could produce significant hail problems, independent of whether surface-based convection ever gets going. Today is not the main event of this pattern. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday are far more significant depending on how each day's atmospheric setup resolves. But on not the main event does not mean you can afford to be complacent today. Moving into Sunday, the forecast complexity increases considerably, and so does the potential severity. The Storm Prediction Center has a large level 2 out of 5 slight risk of severe weather in place that covers nearly all of Wisconsin, northern Illinois, northern Iowa, and Minnesota. A surrounding marginal threat of severe weather extends the area of concern to include Omaha, stretching east all the way to Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Lexington. That is an enormous geographic footprint, and the threats being outlined for Sunday are multiple and serious. The speed of storm movement is one of the underappreciated factors in Monday's setup. A fast-moving squall line can travel at 40 to 60 miles per hour. At that speed, a storm complex that is 200 miles west of Chicago at noon could be in the heart of the city by mid-afternoon. And a complex that is in Chicago at 4 in the afternoon could be over Columbus by 10 at night. When you are calculating when to change plans, when to move cars into the garage, when to get people inside, that speed of movement is the number that actually matters, not the categorical risk rating, not the general forecast. The speed of the system and your distance from it are what translate the forecast into a personal action window. The wind shear environment supporting Monday's complex is also worth a specific mention. Wind shear, in the context of severe thunderstorm development, describes the change in wind speed and direction as you move upward through the atmosphere. Low-level shear, meaning the difference between surface winds and winds a kilometer or two up, is what drives the rotation that produces tornadoes inside supercell thunderstorms. But directional shear throughout a deeper layer of the atmosphere is what supports the large organized storm complexes that produce the most widespread damaging wind events. Monday's environment is showing strong directional shear through a deep layer, which is the ingredient that allows individual storm cells to merge into a single organized complex and maintain that organization for hundreds of miles. A storm complex that stays organized over a long track has a fundamentally different damage footprint than a cluster of isolated storms that each produce a few minutes of wind and then dissipate. Organization is the multiplier. Elevated tornado potential is contingent on discrete supercells developing in that environment, which is possible but not guaranteed. If a supercell does develop over Ohio or Indiana ahead of the main line, it could produce an isolated tornado. More broadly, tornado potential embedded in the squall lines themselves is also possible on Monday, though those tornadoes would likely be brief and weak compared to what a discrete supercell could produce. Most of Monday's storm activity is expected to weaken as it encounters the Appalachian Mountains heading into Tuesday morning, but the damage potential from 75-mile-per-hour wind gusts in advance of that weakening is not to be underestimated. Then comes Tuesday, and Tuesday brings a third and final major round of this prolonged severe weather pattern, this time targeting the East Coast. After driving through the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley on Monday, this powerful storm system will actually intensify as it pushes into New York. The deepening of the low pressure center, dropping to around 992 millibars by Tuesday evening, is extraordinary for this time of year. It is that deepening that generates significantly more wind shear across the region and sets the stage for what could be a more impactful East Coast severe weather event than the initial stages of this pattern might have suggested. For Tuesday, a slight risk of severe weather has been outlined from Philadelphia stretching back into Charlotte, North Carolina, with Asheville included in that threat area as well. The primary concern on Tuesday will be a significant and dangerous wind threat across that East Coast corridor. But an elevated tornado risk is also on the table for Tuesday, and with the storm system deepening to 992 millibars as the driver, this is a serious setup that East Coast residents need to be tracking. If you live anywhere from the greater Philadelphia area southward through the Carolinas, Tuesday is not a day to be dismissive of the forecast. The wind threat alone justifies preparation, and the tornado risk adds an additional layer that demands attention. Looking beyond Tuesday, the pattern begins to relax somewhat in terms of widespread organized severe weather, but it does not go quiet entirely. There is a possibility of some lingering severe weather extending into Wednesday, particularly across Maine, as the storm system pushes into the extreme northeastern corner of the country. After that, forecast uncertainty grows considerably, as is typical at extended range. There are signals in the data suggesting that the northern plains and upper Midwest could be watching another round of potentially significant severe weather developing by the end of the week, possibly including a line of thunderstorms with a severe weather threat attached. The details on that potential are still very uncertain at this range, For next Friday through Sunday, severe weather chances are expected to decrease somewhat, with isolated to scattered severe weather attempts possible again across the northern plains and into the Midwest, heading into the early portion of July. Those details will sharpen as the days pass and the models gain more confidence, so continued monitoring is warranted. For areas outside the main storm track, the West Coast is expected to remain relatively quiet over the coming week, with no significant severe weather concerns on the horizon. Across the southern plains and the southeast, several rounds of showers and thunderstorms will continue to be possible, but this is entirely typical for this time of year and not associated with the larger, severe weather pattern being driven by the jet stream farther north. Beyond Tuesday of this week, the highest confidence severe weather threat diminishes significantly for most of the country, though the northern plains will need to be watched again toward the end of the week. Before closing out this forecast, there are two developments in the Pacific tropics that deserve your attention because severe weather does not only come from thunderstorms. A Category 4 hurricane is currently expected to form in the eastern Pacific over the next few days. At this time, that system appears likely to mostly avoid land, but it is a significant tropical development worth monitoring. The second tropical story is far more immediately relevant, particularly if you have family or connections in Hawaii. Right now, a Category 2 hurricane is located just east of Honolulu. This is a compact but significant tropical system, and as it tracks toward Hawaii over the coming days, it is expected to be at minimum a low to middle grade tropical storm by the time it approaches Honolulu and the broader Hawaiian island chain heading into the weekend and early next week. The primary threats from this system for Hawaii will be storm surge along exposed coastlines, gusty winds, and heavy rainfall. If you are in Hawaii or have family there, now is the time to monitor local National Weather Service forecasts closely and ensure preparations are in place before the system arrives. Stepping back and looking at the full scope of what this forecast represents, this is an exceptional stretch of severe weather. A highly unstable and deeply energized atmospheric pattern is being tapped by a powerful jet stream that is driving an active storm system on a track spanning thousands of miles from the northern plains to the east coast. The instability values projected for portions of this event are well above what is typical for this time of year. The wind shear profiles are generating legitimate tornado potential in focused corridors across multiple days. The sheer geographic scale of this event means that the number of people at risk across the full Sunday through Tuesday window is enormous, and each day of the pattern brings its own distinct set of hazards and geographic focus. Whether your concern is straight-line wind damage, large hail destroying your vehicle or property, or the tornado threat that exists in specific corridors on Sunday and into Monday, the time to prepare is now, not when the first warning is issued for your county. Check your severe weather plan, identify your shelter location. Secure anything outdoors that could become a projectile in high winds. Charge your devices. Make sure you have multiple reliable ways to receive weather alerts, because in a fast-moving multi-day event like this one, conditions can change rapidly and warnings can come with limited lead time. This forecast will continue to be updated as new model runs come in and as the Storm Prediction Center refines its outlooks heading into Sunday and Monday. A live stream is possible on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, depending on how the storm activity develops and where the most significant threats materialize. If you're new here, subscribe now so you do not miss any updates, live coverage, or new outlooks as this historic stretch of severe weather continues to evolve. Thank you for watching. Stay informed and above all, stay safe.